Bruce, if this reaches you, you have to know, every time he comes back, it's getting longer. And he's coming back now. I'm already losing myself, Bruce. He's got terrible plans, too. I don't know what they are, but I can feel it. Today on the Comic Book Report, All-Star Batman Volume 1, My Own Worst Enemy. Stick around and check it out. Greetings from Gotham, everyone. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today in the Batcave, we're reviewing another Batman collection. This is a standard size hardcover, All-Star Batman Volume 1. I decided to go ahead and dust this off and give it a read because I heard this whole run was collected in a hardcover recently, so whether you're going to buy that hardcover or go for these volumes, I thought this would be a good primer on the beginning of this run. Before we jump in though, I'd like to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, maybe some Batman books, I encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's comic book review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Scott Snyder and penciled primarily by John Romita Jr. and Declan Shalvey. The comics in this volume were published by DC Comics beginning in 2016. As far as what this edition collects, it includes All-Star Batman issues 1 through 5. And finally, this is a standard size hardcover edition with nice glossy print paper stock, a glued binding, and a total of 160 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that standard size hardcover for All-Star Batman Volume 1. This is part of that DC Universe Rebirth era, in case you're wondering when this takes place. This run ran on for a couple volumes of this similar size. Like I mentioned at the top of the video, they recently came out with a hardcover. I do believe it's standard edition, standard size. I could be wrong on that, but I know it was just released collecting this entire run, so I know that this run's being talked about a little bit more again. And I thought it was a good time to finally break into it myself, so here we go. The spine on this edition is pretty indicative of what we saw during a lot of the Rebirth era, whether you were getting the trade paperbacks, standard size hardcovers, or some of those deluxe Rebirth editions. They had a lot of this kind of similar spine design, so we have a lot of good uniformity between titles here. Even the deluxe editions for the Tom King Batman run in that Rebirth era looked pretty similar to this for the first 3 volumes, just a little bit bigger. I love what they chose here for the back of the dust jacket. We have a great image of Batman and Two-Face. This is, of course, illustrated by John Romita Jr. in his very distinctive style. But yeah, I really like the look of this. This is kind of a central story based on Batman and Two-Face. Anyway, good stuff on the dust jacket. And to that end, let's go ahead and spend one more minute. We'll examine that dust jacket one final time. I'll show you the interior flaps. We'll get it all spread out so you can see it all at a glance. And then we'll go ahead and transition to the under the dust jacket design for this standard size hardcover. And I'm happy to say we do have images printed on the hardback book itself, which was a nice treat on a standard hardcover. But before that, again, one final look at this dust jacket. Overall, like I said, really like this design. It's pretty indicative of the other DC Rebirth collected editions. But yeah, I still think it's really striking. I like the images they chose. On the hardback book itself, though, we have this great wraparound image of Batman, Two-Face, and Duke. So as much as this is a Batman story, we do also heavily follow the Duke character who kind of rounds out the trio across this book. So to that end, I really am happy with the Under the Dust Jacket art print we get on the hardback book itself, and I just think that this wraparound looks really sleek. The hardback book itself almost has a kind of sheen to it, as if it's sort of glossed as well, which is really nice. I think the images really pop off of this book, and I just really like the feel of it. And now that we've taken that look at the exteriors, I wanted to spend a moment just looking at the binding for this standard size hardcover. As I mentioned, it is a glued binding, so we don't really have an eye or anything like that. But since it is a smaller collection, I'm happy to say the binding is pretty good. There's not a ton of gutter loss, maybe a little bit. This collection laid open pretty well for me as well, and no complaints. Okay, and now let's go ahead and transition to the book proper. As we break into this book, we have some black end pages, a title page, a kind of creative breakdown spread page, as well as a publication information page, and then we go right into the first issue of this collection. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, this does contain the first 5 issues of this All-Star Batman run, which rounds out this first story arc, and I really liked it. I would say right from the jump, you don't really need to know a lot about the characters to enjoy this work. I think overall, this is a really accessible title for new readers. I think some of the draws of this as well, if you're a fan of Scott Snyder, this came out not too long after his run on Batman with Greg Capullo, which is like an award-winning, really prolific run, and at the time we're already seeing Snyder show up in more Bat content, things like Batman Eternal, things like this All-Star Batman here. So I think that Snyder on Batman is definitely still a draw here. We have him paired up for most of the run with John Romita Jr., who is absolutely a prolific artist as well. A very distinctive style for Romita, especially his kind of character models, I think are very immediately recognizable. I know I like some of his work in the JMS Spider-Man run. I really like him in the Superman Year One I read not too long ago. I know he did a lot of the art for the, I think, Rick Remender Captain America run. I mean, he's been all over the place. Those are just a couple of my highlights. But he definitely does the art here, and it's interesting to see his vision of Batman. And later on, the kind of backup stories, we have a really cool kind of little story involving Duke that goes into his past and things like that, and that has art by Declan Shalvey, but we'll see some of that toward the end. So what is this really about, this arc, My Own Worst Enemy? Well, basically, this story has Batman during the Rebirth era essentially going on a cross-country road trip with none other than Two-Face, Harvey Dent. Along for most of this journey as well is his kind of protege, Duke, who is not functioning as a Robin, but effectively can be kind of synonymous with a Robin. I think you could have slotted a Robin in here and had much of the same story. But I do think the kind of agency they give Duke throughout this adventure was really well utilized. I really like it. I feel like I got more of an appreciation for that character. So kudos, Snyder and team. But essentially what we find out toward the beginning of this run is that Two-Face, or Harvey Dent, believes that Two-Face is starting to take over. He has this grand master plan, but there might be a shot at a cure that completely wipes out the Two-Face half of the identity within this one body. And so ideally this would liberate Harvey Dent from the kind of shackles of his alternate evil personality. And so Batman's kind of willing to risk it, kind of willing to take the chance. One of the other things that's really novel here is that we kind of explore the background relationship that Harvey Dent had with Bruce Wayne, particularly during a season in their troubled youth where they kind of got put up at this kind of wayward home to kind of take care of them. Anyway, they have this unlikely friendship, and there's kind of hints toward that. It's almost like Harvey Dent is trying to give Bruce Wayne or Batman tips on where to find the cure and how to stop this. And honestly, it's a really fun setup. It's also a way that Batman tries to fight one of his villains in an unconventional way, this time by helping him, by curing him. And along the way, we just have him getting into so much trouble, not only from exterior forces, but from Two-Face himself, who begins to lash out and suspect what the Dark Knight is doing. A further wrinkle, of course, occurs when there's sort of a call put out. It's kind of a bounty put on eliminating Batman, sort of an assassin target situation. So Batman's also trying to flee all of these villains and even some civilians who are trying to take a shot at Batman for the right price. It is really interesting because it kind of becomes an everyone against Batman free-for-all, and Batman's really just trying to get across country to find the cure. This is a really fun device too because it takes Batman out of Gotham, and we have these kind of punctuated moments throughout the storytelling where it says this many miles to go or miles traveled, and I liked that because you felt like you had this clock that was winding down and we were getting closer and closer to the goal. It really helped pace this book as well, and I just thought that was a really novel approach. There was a palpable sense of the stakes and just tension running throughout all of it. I really love the kind of layers we get with the characters, especially exploring the Two-Face Batman dynamic, and to a lesser extent, but still prominent, the Bruce Wayne Harvey Dent dynamic. It was also cool to see how Duke rounded out this dynamic as well, kind of being the third person in the loop. I also like seeing some of the other villains that showed up and some of the twists and turns here. While this is all happening, we actually have Alfred at the Wayne Manor trying to basically hold off GCPD and Commissioner Gordon from breaking into the Batcave, because there's supposedly been a tip-off that Batman or Bruce Wayne might be involved, and so we have Alfred kind of scrambling to try to get Bruce Wayne clear of any kind of suspicion or possibly outing him as Batman. There's also a kind of tension back home element that I really liked, just kind of intermixed as kind of a subplot with all of the other all-star Batman antics with Batman and Two-Face. Transitioning back to the art by John Romita Jr. for a minute, while I will say he's not ordinarily my favorite comic book artist of all time, I have to give it up for him for his style. He has such a unique approach to character design and faces in particular, and I think in this work they're really evocative. And I actually think where Romita really shines in this arc are some of the action sequences. Like, we have scenes where Batman's getting thrown around, or broken glass, or smoke, or fog, or underwater sequences. There's a lot of just high octane action, and I think Romita really conveys that sense of kind of frantic action just so well. All the images really pop from the page. The coloring as well, just really vibrant and interesting, and it just really works. I think the art direction really fits the kind of nature of this overall story, and I think it's a really good collaboration. And back to that story for a minute, how it basically resolves is they go to where the cure is, but we kind of get this sense that ultimately what this will do is wipe out the Harvey Dent personality, and Dent is actually weak and kind of giving up his fight against Two-Face, wanting it to be over, not wanting to live with the curse of knowing everything he's doing and not strong enough to stop. Batman's, of course, really vexed by this, and ultimately there's this kind of way that basically Harvey Dent will no longer get an out and will always live in that tension, and that's kind of how this story resolves. It's haunting, it's gripping, and it's honestly a really fitting end to this narrative. After that, we go into the last kind of story at the back of this book, and again, I can't tell if they were backup portions of issues or if this is just the final issue. I'm not actually totally sure. But at the back of this, we have the story, The Cursed Wheel, and this is the one that's written by Scott Snyder, but has art, pencil work and inks by Declan Shalvey. Now, I did interview Shalvey on this channel not too long ago. If you're interested in some thoughts from him, I'll try to link that video. But really a terrific creator. I am a fan of his visual style, and I liked his take on Batman and some of these characters. Now, this story really follows Duke as Batman's trying to train him up in a way, but it all really goes into what does Duke stand for, what is he going to fight for, what is his motivation, and how does that differ from maybe some of the Robins. We go into what's going on with his mom, we go into kind of his past, and how he kind of gets the inspiration to push forward and endure the pain. Ultimately, like I said, Duke was used really well throughout this whole thing, but ending with this story, I feel like I got a little bit more of an inside look into this character and what drives him, and I really enjoyed it. And after that, story resolves with kind of a beautiful paternal moment between Bruce Wayne and Duke. We do transition to the extras at the back of this hardcover. Now, this is just a standard size hardcover. This is not a huge deluxe edition or an omnibus or things like that. So I wasn't totally sure what to expect by way of extras, but I'm happy to say that we do have a lot of kind of a variant cover art gallery, and it's really pretty extensive and beautiful. We definitely have a good handful of pages here, and I always like this, and being a huge fan of Batman The Dark Knight, I like to see so many other creative artists kind of adapt their vision of him, and we just get some really stunning covers throughout this. I mean, just look at this art. It's non-stop. It's just really beautiful. And I'm not sure what that hardcover edition that includes this whole All-Star Batman run that they just released has in way of extras, but just for this volume 1, I was really encouraged to see this. But that's really all we get for All-Star Batman Volume 1, My Own Worst Enemy. And now all I think that's left to do is to give this collection a grade. But not before one final look here. Ta-da! Okay, let's wrap up. For an above-average read from some pretty prolific comic book creators, The Comic Book Report is happy to give All-Star Batman Volume 1 by Scott Snyder, John Romita Jr., and Declan Shalvey a B-. I think for me, the greatest strengths of this narrative are that kind of clock feature as we count down the miles to the journey. I really like that storytelling mechanic, and also I think it was a really strong story for the character of Two-Face. I think if you're a fan of this character, you would definitely like reading this more than the general public. I think that that really puts this up in my ranking or estimation, because I do think it's a really good Two-Face story and a really good Batman story. I think we get to know a little bit more about the characters, but I do think I had a hard time just clicking into this world. I do think that the pacing was well done, but it was just quicker moving than a lot of Batman stories I'm used to. And we didn't have a ton of internal monologuing either, which is one of my favorite facets of most Batman works. At any rate, I had a hard time connecting with it at points, but I still think it was a fun story and a worthwhile read. I am curious to see what the rest of the All-Star Batman run is like. If you've read it in its entirety, I would love to get some comments about the rest of this run in the comments below. But anyway, that's my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, that comment we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good one.